Please be seated. First, what a great treat it is to have this massive combined choir here this morning leading us in this Mass setting. Thank you, St. John's Hampton, for being with us. And it just reminds us, I think, when we're led in choral worship through a Mass setting, that the Christian life and Christian worship is about movement, about starting in one place and being led to another. So thank you. Thank you very much. When my father died, I received a good deal of correspondence around that time. I received all manner of short little cards that people signed, wishing me well, saying that they were keeping the family in their prayers. Some of them so short and sweet, and I think short and sweet in those moments, during those times, is important because we don't know what to say so often when grief and loss are so fresh and so close to the surface. But I was also touched by the long letters and notes I received from friends and family. So many of them shared remembrances of my father, the unique individual that he is, and the ways that he touched those around him. And those were most appreciated as well. But I remember one letter in particular very clearly from a priest that I had known for a good deal of time. He was one of these giants in the Episcopal Church. He's been retired for several years, but he served one of these fancy New York parishes. Great spot and kind of a grand old man of the church. And he wrote me this letter, not knowing my father, but knowing about the death of his father. And he approached me that way. He talked about the grief. He talked about the experience of absence and loss, and how difficult those initial days would be, but how the days would change, and how that experience of loss would become something else altogether. The tone in his letter changed as he talked about the experience of his father's death as a kind of charge, a kind of sending forth. He said that when his father died, it was as if his father was still speaking to him, creating room in his absence, saying to his son, I'm gone, and now the time is yours. You are now the standard bearer. You are now the man of this family. It's up to you to take us somewhere. I've given you everything I have. Now is your time. Now is your day. So, son, go. Move forward. Don't stop. Don't sit around. Don't look back. Look ahead. you going? Because it's time for you to go. I think that handoff from generation to generation, I think is an incredibly important and pivotal time in our lives as human beings. But it's also a pivotal and powerful time in the life of the church. Even now, we experience this dynamic in the seasonal life of the church. Thursday, we celebrated the Ascension, Christ's departure, ascending to God's right hand. And the disciples who had shared life and ministry with him, even resurrection, new life with him, they stand at his side, at his feet, and they watch him go. What was it like for those disciples to experience Jesus' absence? Well, I think the lesson from Acts gives us a great indication of what was going on for them. They're confused. They don't know what to do. They're standing there with their hands in their pockets, looking up at the sky. Now, that standing there looking up at the sky must have gone on for some time, because God saw fit to send two men dressed in white robes, presumably angels, to deal with the disciples. And what is it they say to them? Men of Galilee, what are you doing? Why are you standing there looking toward the sky? Why do you have your hands in your pockets? Why are you in neutral? Don't you remember what Jesus was about? Don't you remember what he taught you? Don't you remember the big picture of this gospel message? Stop looking to where he was. Put on your shoes, running shoes if you have them, and go out there, because he's still out there, and you will find him, and you will serve the world in his name, because he's given you what you need to do it. Men of Galilee, stop standing around looking backwards and get on with it. But this happens in a context. In the gospel reading, Jesus utters his prayer for his disciples. He acknowledges the coming shifts of his presence. He acknowledges that he won't leave them forever. He won't leave them without comfort. He acknowledges that they've been faithful keepers of the word. And he trusts them, entrusts them to God. He knows they have what they need to carry on because he's given it to them. And he knows that God will supply them with strength and power. But they have to make a transition. They're no longer students. They're not sitting in the back of the class listening to the teacher. They are now teachers in their own right. And it's their responsibility. It's their role. It's their gospel calling and charge to create another class for them to form, for them to lead, for them to serve. You know, friends, I think this is where we enter as the church right now. We've enjoyed the knowledge of the ways that Christ has been present, and we've had experiences of our own where Christ has been remarkably present in our own lives. We've had the benefit of that demanding, yet patient teacher. We've had the benefit of the compassionate healer and the life giver. We've had the benefit of the knowledge of God manifest in a person, flesh and blood, showing us what God is like and inviting us to be a little more divine ourselves. But it's not a passive presentation. It's not merely some kind of object lesson. It's a charge to get on board, strap on our shoes, and take our role in the world that needs disciples right now, that needs compassionate, healing life givers in our midst. Friends, we've been given all that we need, and we have more than enough. And we've been called to make it our own. The good news of the gospel is that while we do it on our own, standing on our own 2 feet, redeemed by the living God, we don't do it alone. We're strengthened, supported, and cared for by the God who created us and by the God who loves us. I suspect if Jesus were to reveal himself to us right now, stand right in our very midst, he might not utter that high priestly prayer from the Gospel of John. He might use the words of the angels that spoke to the disciples. Men and women of Galilee, what are you doing? Men and women of New York City, what are you doing? Men and women of Paducah, Kentucky, why do you have your hands in your pockets? Men and women of Williamsburg, get out there. Don't look back. Look ahead. Serve the world in my name. I've given you what you need, and you have everything to do it. Men and women, don't just stand there. Get on.